This is Chris with Space Cabin Audio. In this video, we're going to take a look at programming closed eighth note hi-hats. More specifically, we're going to take a look at using the Moeller technique. In this particular instance, we're going to be using a downstroke followed by an upstroke to create a unique sound or a unique groove on the hi-hat. Here I have a simple groove ready to go. Here's what it sounds like. I think we could make this a lot better with a really cool hi-hat pattern. Before we dive into programming these hi-hats, let's take a look at a drummer named Chris Carroll play this technique. Let's watch it again, only this time in slow motion. Notice on the downstroke he's hitting the shank, and on the upstroke he's hitting the tip. This creates two unique velocities and it creates a really cool groove. Let's dive in. Before we begin, I'm using Accent from Platinum Samples and I'm using our library named Desert Drums for this particular video. I'm also using a custom MIDI map over here. Here we go. And I've got all of my hi-hats stacked up here so that I can access each articulation with greater ease. So starting at B-1, I have them just lined straight up so I know where everything is and everything's easily accessible while we do this. We could have different MIDI maps, but most drum programs will allow you to do something similar to this. So let me close this up and let's get started. Let's listen to this drum groove again. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my velocity to about 110. This is a good starting spot. Some people will start at 100, some people will start at 110, some people will start at 105, some people will start at 80. It all depends on really what you're trying to get across. This is a bit more of an aggressive drum part, so I'm going to start a bit louder. I generally won't start at 127. I find that really limiting in terms of what I'm trying to achieve. Now we need to start thinking like a drummer, but before we can, let's just get this part drawn in. So I'm going to go down here, and I know my shank is on C0, so I'm just going to program those on all the quarter notes. Now if I hit play, this is what it will sound like. Pretty sterile. This is the downstroke part of the Moeller technique. Now we need to do the upstroke. Now the upstroke is going to be a little bit quieter because upstrokes are generally quieter. Now I'm going to change my velocity from 110 down to about 50. I probably won't stay there, but it's usually a good starting spot. Remember, the shank is the downstroke, so it's going to be louder, and the tip is the upstroke, so it's going to be quieter. Now I'm just going to go and pop in all of those offbeats. Let's take a listen now. Very cool. We already have a totally different feel now with these hi-hats. Now, when we're talking about thinking like a drummer, we also have to analyze the pattern within a pattern. So what is a pattern within a pattern? Well, you'll notice up here, for instance, on the kick drum, if we take a look at the kick drum, we'll notice that the velocities definitely have a pattern to how they're being played. Now, they're not exactly the same. This was played by a real drummer. The intent was to keep them exactly the same. But if you've ever been a drummer, you'll know that's almost impossible. When we're programming patterns within patterns, we also need to keep that in mind, that if we keep the velocities exactly the same throughout the pattern, it's not really going to match the drummer's intent. So I am going to raise this first one up, every second one up, and I'm not even going to look at how much I'm bringing them up. I'm just going to bring them up. I want them to be varied. I don't want them to be exactly the same. Now let's take a listen. I want this one up a bit more. We now have a different pattern within this pattern where every second downstroke is a louder velocity, but not the same loudness, just more accented. Now I'm going to change this pattern up just a little bit more. I'm going to take the first of the upstrokes and I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. Then I'm going to take the second of the upstrokes and I'm going to turn it down a bit. So now we're creating another pattern. This time we're going loud on the first hit, quiet on the second, loud but not as loud as the first on the third, and quieter but not as quiet as the second on the fourth. I'm going to continue doing this, and again, I'm just going to rough it in. I'm not going to try and make it exact. I want it to maintain some type of feel. So let's take a listen. We now have a totally different feel than where we started from. If you wanted to take this further, we could vary the timing of each of these MIDI notes. So for instance, I can make this one just a little bit late. I'll bring this one a little bit early, but not too much. And I'll continue doing this, just randomizing the timing of these hi-hats ever so slightly. We don't want to go too far with them. We want them to be very close to the grid. But we do want some semblance of timing. So notice here, this is played by a real drummer, so this note is a little late. So I'm actually going to leave that one on there because it will sound pretty good. By placing the majority of these later in the grid value, we're going to give this hi-hat a very relaxed feel. I'm not going to place them all late because no drummer would ever play that way. But if I tend to look more towards putting things late, it will give us that relaxed feel. Let's take a listen now. Very cool. We now have a super relaxed feel with this groove, and this was all done with nothing but the pencil tool. Join us for our next Thinking Like a Drummer video next week. If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out some of our drum libraries at spacecabinaudio.com.